Welcome to my channel. I'm Daniel Norton, photographer here in New York City, and also content creator, right? I've been producing content for YouTube for well over 10 years, and one thing I can say is that I'm always looking to improve my process, make things easier for myself, make things more streamlined, and make things better. So I was very excited when TourBox reached out and asked me to do a video about their product, the TourBox Elite. This is the kind of device that could completely change the way that I edit. I've messed around a little bit with it before. We're going to look at the video editing side of this thing and see, will this change the way I edit? So the TourBox is very cool looking, kind of almost like a video game controller. Although, unlike a video game controller, this will help you be more productive and not less. But what I love about it is how you can very simply put your hand on top of it and rest it there. All the buttons, once you get a feel for what they do, are just in the right spot. And why is that? Well, because you can program them yourself. Here's the thing. If you've been watching this channel at all, you know that while I love new technology, I also get stuck in my ways, like many of us. We have a system, it works, why change it? Will it really make that much of a difference? So whenever I look at a new piece of technology, I'm always kind of hesitant to mess with it. And this was no different. I had to kind of look at it, figure out how I would use it. And at first, I wasn't really sure it would be for me, to be honest. I mean, I had a great way of editing my videos, right? I've been doing it for so long. Also, what's the learning curve here? I'm going to have to jump in on this thing. Well, a couple things are great about this. Number one, spoiler, it did actually improve my workflow. And number two, there's a great community around TourBox that are making various presets and sharing them. So if you're using different software, you can jump on there and see what people have created, download them, and then adjust it to your taste. So a few years back, I switched from Adobe products for the most part to various other things. And for my video editing, I started using a program called LumaFusion, which at the time was available only on iPad. So I would start doing my video editing on my iPad. Well, I got a MacBook Air with an M1 chip, and Luma worked on that. So for a while, I've been sitting with my little tiny MacBook Air editing in LumaFusion, and it works really well. And when I first grabbed the TourBox, I thought, cool, this is great. I'll sit down and mess with this thing. But it was kind of awkward for me to get my hands in the right spot because I was so used to doing it the way I was doing it. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe I'm fine. And then I upgraded. That is to say, I got a new desktop computer. Well, it's another MacBook Pro, but for my desk here where you can see me working. I plugged this thing in, and suddenly the way that I worked with the MacBook Air kind of on my coffee table didn't work anymore. It was awkward for me to reach over to my trackpad. It was just hard to do things. The mouse was completely different. Here's where the TourBox came in handy. I put my hand on this thing and I started working. With my hand on the TourBox, one hand on the mouse, occasionally jumping over to the keyboard to type something, I was able to work even more efficiently than I was on the MacBook Air. Now, I should point out that TourBox is not just a keyboard shortcut device, basically. It's not just macros. It's got also some built-in functionality for various programs and also the OS. For Capture One, which I use, also many of the Adobe products, and the Apple interface itself, TourBox has some built-in functionality that will allow you to do things that just simply keyboard shortcuts can't. So again, I would just want to stress here that using the TourBox is much different than using, let's say, a mouse and an external keyboard with keyboard shortcuts built in, not only because you can customize it, obviously you can do that with other things, but because the way your hand sits on it and because how natural it feels to just kind of move from one thing to another. You're never raising your hand. You're kind of moving your thumb over, sliding a finger, pressing this button, pressing that. I also group things together so that, for instance, select and cut are right across from each other so that I'm selecting, I'm cutting, I'm selecting, I'm cutting. It's really fast. I don't have to worry about moving my hands all over a keyboard. It's all right there. Just like anything else, though, there is definitely a learning curve. And the people over at TourBox, they sent me a set of presets for LumaFusion, which was great. It got me started. But I have to say, for my use, many of them just weren't what I wanted. So what it takes to use something like this, in my opinion, is to sit down and know that, hey, normally it takes me half an hour to do this. It's going to take me an hour for the next 3 or 4 of them because I'm going to keep stopping and reprogramming, readjusting my TourBox to get it exactly the way I want it. Now I know with some combination keys, moving my hand around a little bit, I can do 90% of the edit that I do. And let me just talk about my process here. So normally when I edit in LumaFusion, I just dump everything into the timeline in order because that's generally how I work with a single camera, and I shoot in order. And then what I'll do is I'll scroll through, watching, listening, adjusting, and I'll cut out sections that are bad, like where I just goofed up there, right? Long gaps, right? We'll remove those from the production. And then the other thing I do is I often use, and you probably know this if you watch the channel, I use some titles to break up my sections. So I've set up a cut and then insert main title as some of the buttons on my D-pad. Then I can go into title and type in what I want. Sometimes I'll do that right away. Other times, if I'm doing a kind of a rough edit, what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll just cut, delete, and then insert main title, cut, delete, and I'll work my way through the entire project, sitting at my computer like I am here. Of course, not looking at the camera, but looking at my screen. And once I get through to the end, and this is really the thing that, it was the first thing that really occurred to me with TourBox, was I can then go back and pick this thing up in my hand, and it's Bluetooth. I don't have to be sitting at the desk here. I have a nice 4K screen next to me. I can slide my chair back and sit here with this thing in my hand, play, pause, make more adjustments, tweak it with this thing in my hand. And it makes for a very comfortable kind of second/finishing edit. I actually discovered this somewhat by mistake because I was using the MacBook Air, as I mentioned, and I kind of beamed it onto a TV to see it bigger. And I was like, wow, this is really nice not to have the computer right in front of me. And again, because it's Bluetooth, I can be wherever I need to be. You can plug it in, of course, as well, which of course is beneficial for like your day-to-day always using it. So having that versatility, I think, is really useful. So as I said, this is not the kind of thing that you're just going to sit down and start using and it's just going to change everything for you. But I think if you take the time and figure out how this can fit into your workflow, it really will speed things up and make them more efficient. It will keep you kind of in the groove, if you will, where you don't have to keep looking. I mean, I have to look down to type. I'm a touch typer, so when I'm using keyboard shortcuts, I'm reaching here. This, I just got a feel for it. I had my hand on it. I could slide my fingers around. You know where the buttons are. You're making your adjustments. But it took me a minute. So I had the TourBox console up on the screen. I would stop and make adjustments. So definitely do that. Make adjustments, make changes, tweak it as you go. And this is for every program. Now, obviously, if you're using various programs that use similar things like cut, paste, etc., you could always make those buttons the same. That's probably a good idea. So your mind works that way. But I think it's worth trying. So I should mention that I'm using TourBox Elite, which is the top of the line. There are 3 levels. There's Neo and Light. So depending on your budget, you can find one that fits for you. Check this out. Follow the link in the description. And I think it will really change your workflow. It changed mine.